A very good afternoon to all of you joining us today for this wonderful encounters webinar that we're doing today. And we're talking specifically about distribution for documentaries. My name is Khanyi Magubane and I am your host this afternoon. And this is part of docCHAT. docCHAT, of course, is one of the programs that is part of the Documentary Filmmakers Association. I'm from the DFA myself. I am a filmmaker. I come from a journalism background and I've been making films across different genres from nonfiction to fiction as well. And I'm looking forward to today's discussion and just some housekeeping rules. We do have a chat function that you'll be able to put your questions on, and to those who are streaming and joining us via social media, there is also a comments section. We do have some of our administrators who are going to be manning those pages, and if you do have questions that you'd like to post on there, please do so as well. And without further ado, I'd like to start by just introducing our panels that we have today. We also do have Mandisa Zitha, who's the Festival Director for Encounters. And I think it would be amiss if we didn't just start with a word from Mandisa, just to welcome all of us today and set the tone for this afternoon's discussion. Mandisa, a very good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon and welcome everybody to the docCHAT session on Distribution Toolkit. My name is Mandisa Zitha and I'm the Director of Encounters. We're absolutely delighted to have collaborated with the Documentary Filmmakers Association in organizing this session on distribution, which I think is quite pertinent and timely with all the developments that are happening in the industry with regards to the various broadening tools that are available to us now as filmmakers. And I really hope that this session will appeal to both emerging and established filmmakers. I'd like to especially thank Rachel Gordon, whose book, The Distribution Toolkit, we kind of based this session on. And so I'm really looking forward to hearing her insights based on her work and research in this topic. And a special warm welcome to Nicola van Niekerk from Showmax for joining us. We're pretty excited to hear what they're doing at Showmax to provide opportunities for filmmakers. So please enjoy the session and thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much, Mandisa. And I would like to start by introducing our first panelist today. Her name is Rachel Gordon, and she is the author of the book, The Documentary Distribution Toolkit, How to Get Out, Get Seen, and Get an Audience. Thank you so much, Rachel, for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
And I think we're going to put up an image of your book as well, so that people out there can just get to see it, if we can be assisted with that image.
And I think the publisher, I may have to find the link again, the publisher sent me a discount for people who are attending. It's not public, so they sent like a link to Loot, I think it was, and one other. So I think I sent it on before, but I can resend it or put it back in the chat if I can find it. So it's just for people who are attending. It's not, you are not going to find it if you don't go through that link. So if you like, I can find that for you.
And thank you so much to the publisher for that discount.
Yeah, every little bit helps. Every little bit helps, I tell you. You know,
absolutely.
I mean, I think it's in some ways it's so I'll give you, let's see, this is the print edition. And let's see if I can find the other one. I'm sorry. Are you going to ask me something? I don't want to interrupt.
No. Don't worry. We've got the image, and I think everybody attending the session can see it, so we know, you know, which book to look out for. And thank you so much again to the publisher for that discount. I'd also like to welcome Nicola van Niekerk. She is a broadcast.
Sorry. No, go ahead. I apologize. I'm going to shut up.
No problem. I'd also like to take this time to welcome Nicola van Niekerk. She is a broadcast and television professional, and she has over 17 years experience under her belt. She's worked on many of Mnet's titles over the years, and she is also the commissioning editor of the true crime documentary 4-part series called Devilsdorp. And for those who don't know what Devilsdorp is about, we are going to play a trailer shortly, but I just maybe also wanted to read a line that it depicts and analyzes 11 killings in Krugersdorp by the group Electors per Dies, which means elected by God between the years 2012 and 2016, and it follows these cult killings. And the filmmakers actually took their time and they just tracked everything that happened. And let me just say, it was received phenomenally. So welcome, Nicola, and once again, congratulations for that. Thank you. Can we play the trailer of the documentary?
Krugersdorp is a town within the West Rand, Johannesburg, South Africa.
Eendag, toe word iemand vermoor. En toe word nog iemand vermoor. En nog iemand.
In a country where thousands of people are murdered every year, this case stands out.
The police found his body in a bathtub. She stabbed her about 65 times. They found a charred body.
Hierdie mense het geen respek vir die dood nie. Hulle het haar uitgesleep en soos 'n stuk rabbies in die veld gelos.
Ja, dit klink maar soos 'n fliek uit Hollywood uit, maar dit is eintlik alles die waarheid.
Die polisie het moorde gehad en geen suspects nie. Wat 'n soort siek persoon is dit? Is dit 'n heks? Is dit 'n satanis?
Bose geeste kan jy oorneem as jy jouself oopmaak vir hulle.
Can be compared to the Charles Manson type of cult.
They decided to call themselves Electors per Dies.
This was a condoned murder, condoned by the messianic figure.
A 42nd generational satanic witch.
She could also apparently change into a werewolf.
If she would go beyond a 30-kilometer radius from her place of residence, death curses will be activated.
En alles wat sy vir hulle gesê het hulle gedoen.
They were drawn into this.
We have a high school teacher and actually a straight-A student. What makes you, an above intelligent person, kill someone in such a brutal way?
She was a person giving instructions, pulling the strings as a puppeteer. She was never on any crime scene. It's almost impossible to get to the kingpin, the mastermind. The facts are sometimes so bizarre. We thought that is too far-fetched to be real.
Die duiwel is los in Krugersdorp.
Oh my goodness, that was so scary. I mean, just watching it right now is getting goosebumps. And thank you so much for that. Well, today we are getting into our discussion on the distribution toolbook. And as much as we are going to zone in on the book, we're going to have an all-inclusive discussion on distribution as a whole. And we're going to draw from the experiences of our panelists who've been working in this industry for so many years and have really accumulated so much knowledge in terms of the art of filmmaking, getting your films out there, the different types of avenues, the creative and innovative ways that filmmakers have to think, and in terms of always breaking out of the box in terms of getting your film out there. And Rachel, I'm going to start with you. You've put together this amazing book, which I have to say, when I read it, it really was one of the most practical film books I've ever, come across, because you list film festivals, filmmakers that you spoke to, you traveled the world, you spent time, you had discussions with people, you got their case studies, how did they cut through many of the challenges, you talk about issues of money, budgeting, everything that a filmmaker in the documentary genre, and I think in documentaries in fact in filmmaking as a whole, needs to know. And it's the type of knowledge and the type of book that almost needs to be our Bible, in this industry. Just maybe talk to us about the process of writing this book and what actually inspired it all.
Okay, I'm not muted. There we go. I actually didn't travel anywhere. I did everything from my computer. So thank you for consistent internet. I know that's not the same everywhere. So I was looking for a job. I had graduated from an MBA program in arts and media management specifically, which had focused on the arts and media being financially sustainable. And one of the chapters I had written was about crowdfunding, which is the second chapter in the book. And I wanted to write about actual experiences of people and how that translated to long-term use and not just the campaign itself. So I did that for grad school, but then I was writing about distribution and meeting up with distribution companies in Canada to try to get a job after grad school. And I was writing a blog, and one of the media librarians that I used to work with to put films in educational facilities in the United States, which I did 20 years ago, said, no one's talking about this, and someone should really publish this. Like, someone should write about this in film schools, because film schools don't discuss this stuff, and it would be very useful. And I said, well, how do I do that? So she sent me the link to Routledge, which is where the library bought film books. And I sent them my crowdfunding chapter, and they said, well, do you want to make this global? And do you want to publish a book? And I said, okay, so it took a year. And you submit a chapter, and then you get anonymous reviews and comments from people that the publisher works with. So one of the comments was, we would like to have as many case studies as possible, like people who've actually done it. And I thought it was a brilliant idea, because filmmakers can learn so much from each other, and they're not always given the opportunity to. And then I had already had a background in educational media, so I knew there had to be a chapter on education. And I knew there had to be a chapter on sort of the infrastructure as well, which includes places like Encounters, in that it's not something you're taught about at film school, that there's this whole documentary world out there. You're sort of taught about production and post-production. And then afterwards, you're like, well, what comes next? But you should sort of all know that what the entire world is sort of doing, if you can. So so the first chapter was actually, which is sort of the very beginning, is really the last one I wrote, because I kind of tried to sum up what was important from every other chapter. So the first chapter is the intro, second is crowdfunding, the third chapter is about all the documentary organizations and events that are really useful, not just for publicity, like going to Sundance or something, but really places that producers and industry representatives that I talked with said was important for them to show up to, that they found it valuable. So, and it's kind of listed by calendar, by the calendar year. The fourth chapter is about streaming. I will tell you that a good half of the information in there is possibly no longer valid, because like Vimeo no longer exists the way it is. Amazon changed whether or not they would allow people to put content up while I was writing the book. But what the focus that I really think is still important in the streaming chapter is that if you focus more on like local streamers in your country and not necessarily the global ones, and you focus on thematic ones, it can be very helpful to make sure that you connect with your audiences more and kind of know who they are. The fifth chapter is about social action groups and nonprofit organizations and how to work with them. The sixth chapter is education, and the seventh chapter is television. And television in the US is separated from television everywhere else because the systems just work differently. So I try to give tools in each chapter about sort of what the key takeaways were of these are the things you should focus on. I think the main point is that no filmmaker should expect to do everything, but at least they will have the language to ask good questions and understand and make good partnerships as they go forward. Does that answer your question? You're on mute. You're on mute.
Thank you. I didn't want to. My neighbor's dogs are barking, so I didn't want. So I didn't want that sound to filter in. But Rachel, you raised so many key and pertinent points that I'd like to draw Nicola into, and this also goes back to a discussion we had a little bit earlier on about the importance for filmmakers to understand the complete value chain of filmmaking over and above the creative aspect of filmmaking, because we don't make films for ourselves, we make films for audiences. And once you make a film for an audience, then you're starting to speak about a commercial entity. And that's what every film is. It becomes a commercial property that'll either be sold or commissioned, or there'll be so many ways to get it out there. And for you, Nicola, having worked now in streaming, but also in channels, you know, when it comes to distribution within those platforms, what are the important things for filmmakers to know and understand?
I think if you're looking at documentaries specifically and the distribution of documentaries, I believe that never has a documentary been as popular as it is today. And I'm very thankful for it, because I think nothing is as good as a true story. But what's quite important when you're looking at distributing a documentary worldwide is to really, as a filmmaker, consider where your documentary sits for a broadcaster. So a lot of people come to Mnet and Showmax and they pitch documentary ideas, and it's like completely doesn't suit what's on the channel, or it has been done, or that sort of thing. So I think what's incredibly important is, for if you're going to pitch your ideas to broadcasters or co-production partners, know what it is that they invest in the first place. And then, because you're going to go into a financial deal with them, understand what their core desire is. So, for example, I mean, this is a very bad. Please, this is an example only. Please don't take it as gospel or anything more as an example. But let's say, for example, Mnet really wants to be able to show whatever we make or whatever we have licensed or co-produced in our country. So you want to show it in Nigeria, for example, or in Kenya or wherever. So that will be very important to us, and those are rights that we will probably not negotiate on. But what will we negotiate on? Let's say you negotiate and you say, listen, do you really want the Portuguese rights in those countries? Would you let that go? No, maybe Portuguese rights are not as important, but that will be very important to a Portuguese broadcaster. Or if you're going to have French and you want to go to Canal Plus, that might be important for them. So to think practically about what it is that broadcasters and specific territories want when you try and put together co-production funding. So don't come, a lot of people come to Mnet and to Showmax and they say, oh, Mnet should have this and Showmax should have this, but it's the same company, and it doesn't work specifically. You have to really think about it as a business deal.
And I like what you say about business deals, because many times filmmakers want to have that knowledge, but they don't always know how to acquire that knowledge, because, you know, in film school, like we were talking, they really do focus on the art and the technicalities of making the film, and the business side of it starts to lack. Now, Nicola, you mentioned something that was actually written about in Rachel's book, which, you know, when you said it, I thought, wow, it's almost as if you guys were having the same conversations. And that is about the importance of where you are seen and who you connect with, and understanding what they have funded before, which is something that Rachel talks about. Before attending film festivals, set up your meetings, understand who you're going to meet. And Rachel, you have a chapter on the book, chapter 3, that maybe I'd like us to zone into, and you call it like documentary organizations worth knowing. And you say, first things first, you know, that film festivals can be a very important tool in the distribution process for a number of reasons. Number one, they put you in the spotlight and in the periphery, in the eyes of the relevant people who need to see your film. And those are your agents, your potential funders. However, to get your film into film festivals is not easy. And you say in the book that, for instance, only 1 to 2% of all submissions make it into Sundance, you know, and this is after spooling through so many films that only that top tier, you know, films will make it into. So the filmmakers need to understand that when they're going to a film festival, it's not just necessarily because they have a film showing, but it's also for the networking, it's for the business part of it, right? And you say that film festivals play a role in the distribution process because they form a juncture between content and distribution. Can you maybe talk about why film festivals are also important for anyone trying to get their film out there, whether as an active participant in the film festival or as a filmmaker making a film and wanting to get it out there?
Sure. So film festivals are multi-layered organizations. You know, they work, they connect with publicity, you know, they connect with local media. They connect with local organizations often, like if they're doing either sort of volunteer work, or in this case, docCHAT is working with Encounters, right? So that's an example of an organization working with a film festival. They also tend to work, they're a hub for distributors to go to. So they become this kind of community meeting place. And so they can be very useful for that. One of the things that someone told me who owns a distribution company is that she actually suggested that filmmakers go to the same festival every year, whether or not they have a film, to show that they're still working, that they are professional, that they can get things done. So, you know, when it gives you longevity, it gives you a professional standing. And it's whether you're, so when, and because people are meeting for a specific reason, it's very easy to communicate. Usually it's a very friendly environment. And people will be willing to have a quick chat just to know what, you know, you can even sit there and say, can we just have a chat? Can I understand what you're doing in the next year or 2 years? You know, you can sort of target people who you know are going to sort of say, to sort of see if they're a good match for eventually working together. And you may not be, and that's okay too. And it's even okay to admit that. So the more sort of honest and clear and open, but also, you know, as long as you're not trying to take 2 or 3 hours of someone's time, someone will have a chat with you for 10 minutes or 15 minutes. So they're just this kind of really unique kind of conference also of places, and most of them host people from all over the world too, right? So it's not usually just a small little hub. Like I'm in Toronto and you're in South Africa. So that's pretty impressive, right? So festivals do all of these kind of layering experiences for people, and they can be very useful for that reason.
And that's a very important point to make, because it's important to get out there. You are the face of your film as the filmmaker, you know, and as much as we try to get out there are costs to attending film festivals. There are, you know, very practical logistics that a filmmaker may not necessarily always have, you know, handy. And that's why you say in the book that filmmakers need to save for travel. As much as they need to save for making films, you need to save for travel to go and get your film out there. Now, Nicola, it's a very different playground where you're at, you know, with streamers. You know, you're not taking meetings all day for people just wanting to talk about their films and what you're working on. You're looking for that bright spark, that bright idea. You know, how open are streamers to non-solicited proposals coming in? Hi, I'm Khanyi, I'm a documentary filmmaker. I'd like to know what Showmax is doing. I'd like to put out a film. I don't know what you guys want, and I would like there to be synergy between the two of us. There is something I'm working on. There's nothing completed, but I'd like to create some sort of synergy between the two of us. Are you open to that kind of engagements with just ordinary filmmakers that are making films, specifically documentaries?
I don't mind at all. We're always open to it. We've got very specific rules that are mandated to us by our broadcast license, and that is that submissions have to be submitted on our submissions portal. Because then you get a little registration number. You know, we are very often blamed and said that this person's amazing idea was stolen by that person's amazing idea. So we prefer not to engage with people until they have submitted their proposals there, because it keeps us safe and we know exactly who we're speaking to and that sort of thing. And we are always looking for new ideas. We really are. We're looking for strong commercial ideas that can get eyeballs across South Africa. You know, as much as we know that there are specific viewing segments in South Africa, what documentary does is it crosses sort of that demographic. It's not only for this market or that market. Documentary and a good story, because it's based in real life and very authentic, crosses any and all viewers. Something like Devilsdorp was watched. I couldn't believe the people. I thought there was a lot of people who wouldn't watch it because there was Afrikaans in it, and it trended on Twitter. Can you see? I don't have Twitter. That's why I sound awkward when I say it. Sorry. So we want those stories that spanned that cross that demographic barrier. That said, there are some stories that we would prefer not to invest a lot in. So political stories are very difficult to manage. And the one thing I want to say is that a lot of people come to us and they make massive promises on their documentary. You know, it's this murder, and they're gonna have the crime scene photos, and they're gonna talk to the murderer. And that is impossible in our country. You cannot get into prisons to talk to prisoners. That is not allowed in our country. So we're not like America in that way. We are not allowed to show any footage from inside interrogation rooms. You have to get massive permissions from the NPA. So all I ask is, when people come to me, don't come to me with a half-baked idea and big dreams. You must have done some research, have facts behind you. This is what we have. I have this B-roll. I have this exclusive access. This is signed, because that makes it much easier, because we've had so many ideas fall through because of people who don't know what permissions are required and clearances are required, and then they've wasted everybody's time.
And that's a very important point on clearance and rights. I mean, I'm busy working on a biopic right now, and one of the things I needed to do first things first before I even go further was to get their family's permission, you know, and to the point of getting it in written form. So that also helped when we were securing interviews, because people want to know, am I speaking to credible people? Is this a credible production company? If I'm doing a production on person X, you know, at the end of the day, you know, like you say, it would be wasting everybody's time for all these amazing, astute people to do these interviews, only for them to never see the light of day, because, you know, there was never the right permissions, right? So when it comes to distribution and streaming, particular, talk to us, Rachel, about, you know, what opportunities there are. And you've spoken about the importance of starting local, and we do have Showmax here, so that filmmakers should engage their local streamers and platforms, and also look global. So think global and also think local. Talk to us about, you know, how big or how open streamers globally are to documentary and documentary filmmakers with sometimes they're out there ideas.
So my experience in writing that chapter taught me a few things. Number one, the thing that I think you need to know about streaming, and Nicola may absolutely correct me as being at one, is that there's a lot of technical requirements. A lot of technical requirements that you may not be aware of when you're in production. Deliverables, assets. I know a lot of people try to use screenshots, which no one likes screenshots. So I think actually, even before you go to a streamer and find a streamer, you actually have to understand what the deliverables are first. I know I actually tried for the book to put, before Amazon said they wouldn't take it anymore, I actually tried to put my own film, an old fiction film, on Amazon. I paid basically a service provider who would deliver it to platforms. So when you're dealing with like sort of the bigger, in the book, I divided into sort of 5 tiers because there's kind of different levels of streaming. You know, there's the big ones like Netflix and Amazon that honestly don't care about independence. Oops, I'm being taped. I probably shouldn't say that. But when they do get independent films, they generally do it through a distributor. They don't usually go directly to a filmmaker unless the film is at Sundance or some other big name festival, usually. Then you have ones that kind of come from so there's the big tier ones that normally go through distributors. There's a lot of places there was a place called Under the Milky Way that I interviewed who has like 7 different offices around the world, and they are a distributor directly for streamers too. And then was Giant Interactive. So there are places that provide a service to get your content up. Usually streamers don't necessarily deal directly with independent filmmakers unless they're part of a broadcaster, from what I have been able to ascertain. And so there's a lot of self-publishing that happens. I think the interesting thing about streamers is the more work you do, the more money you can get if you're doing all the work. But the problem is that there isn't usually an easy way to do it. And again, there's a lot of technical specifications, and all of them are different, and they all change. All of them change their expectations too, based on internet issues or, delivery standards in the region. So it kind of goes back to what film do you have first and where it actually makes sense for it to go, whether it's Showmax, which unfortunately I didn't know about when I wrote my book. I'm sorry I didn't put it in there, but because I tried to actually put some from every region, but it kind of goes back to like, before you try to send everything out into the world, go back and see where does this actually belong. So there was a great organization I found in the US called Quelly TV. That was a woman, I interviewed her for the book, and it's all African diaspora content, and they do fiction and nonfiction. So the other thing about streamers that's useful is you can find some with sort of like themes or based on specific groups of people, and it may be fiction and nonfiction. But again, you kind of have to do the research. You kind of have to know, is this where this would live? Is this where the audience that I want to reach will actually watch it? That's the other thing. You don't want to just go to a streamer if nobody that is your intended audience is actually going to be able to watch it, So I think there's some other questions you have to ask first before you decide which streamers you want to focus on. Does that make sense?
Absolutely makes sense. And I think where I want to come in now is connecting buyers to sellers, right? And also just talking about the importance of filmmakers having agents, people who sell their films for them, people who understand, where the distribution channels will be for this kind of film. And in South Africa, unless you're sitting in a particular tier of filmmaking, it's not information that's readily available in terms of the agents that are out there who will help with your distribution channels and things like that. And from you, Nicola, do you often work with distributors or with filmmakers directly when it comes to your platforms and products that have already been fully made and packaged and are more looking for a licensed distribution deal?
So we have the full commissions, and then we have internal distributors. But that's not very interesting for this forum. But what we are finding happening is on the bigger sort of projects where people are looking for gap financing or trying to sell it to us as a territory as part of a co-production, then we deal not directly with the other distributors because we deal with the filmmakers, but we deal with the distributors' paperwork. And I think this is a very important note for South Africans because we are sort of new to going to all these festivals and showcasing our stuff there, and then probably you're signing a distributor. We see paperwork come from distributors. Then a filmmaker is so excited, but what they've signed is insane, and it happens time after time that we say, well, we can't actually enter this deal. And if you really go look at the financing, you can't sign a deal where a distributor is taking 20% of your sales. That's insane. And so sort of where they start taking their 20% is another thing that you'll have to really look at the fine print. But so for me, that's sort of my biggest note is be very careful when before just signing with a distributor, because it does actually impact what else you might be able to sell. But how would we know? Because you're excited to have an international distributor. And I think that's why we need to, I'm hoping Rachel's book has a chapter on what's acceptable terms to have in your distribution deal.
Wonderful. And as we continue, let me just remind our audiences, both those in the session and those following us on streaming, to write your questions to our panelists. At about 1:45, I will be opening the floor for questions and answers. And this is your opportunity to ask all of those burning questions that you've had for quite a while. They are here and they'll be joining us to answer as many of your questions. And we do have our administrators who will be manning those questions coming through from our live streaming platforms. I want to talk now about budgets. Money, 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 right? When a filmmaker wants to put their film out there, are there distribution costs that they should factor into their overall budget? Or can we say distribution is an external function that you should probably get separate funding for, not the broader budget for making your film, but it should actually just be a distribution budget that will include the traveling, that will include meeting people. Where does that factor in terms of how we put together our budgets for our films?
That's a really interesting question. And I think in a way you have to answer it based on who the budget is going to. Because for instance, if you're going to a grant foundation, they may want to know what your distribution and outreach plan is while you're in production. But if you're going to like a broadcaster, I don't know, maybe the broadcaster doesn't necessarily need to know that part. They want to know that your production budget makes sense so that you can actually complete it. And that might include whether or not you've put aside money for, guilds, if you need to pay guilds, royalty payments, or, workers' comp. There are a lot of elements, I think, that people aren't aware they should put in, but it's sort of about who the budget is targeted to, I would say, before you can kind of understand. I think as a filmmaker, it is, I feel like you should, in general, if you're doing just your budget for yourself for planning, that you should have professional development, I would say, budget, not necessarily distribution, just sort of professional development, because to me, it's not just about one project. It's about being able to do multiple projects and having longevity, right? So it should sort of maybe be part of your overall kind of personal company budgeting to do that. And then you can kind of create little segments for it for each film as you go. But I'm not sure how much it's extra versus more. It sort of depends on what you're planning for.
That makes complete sense. And bringing you, Nicola, into this discussion, the importance of understanding a distribution plan, because each film needs a distribution plan over and above just the budgets, and the distribution plan also helps your funders to have an idea of how well you understand the market and audience of your film. And do you find that, Nicola, companies with, very clear distribution plans, or when they come to Showmax and they've identified Showmax as, a platform that would actually fit perfectly with their films, that you can actually tell when somebody has an idea or doesn't have an idea?
Yeah, no, that's exactly true. So you can see sort of, how you should structure your budget is this is the structure, this is the budget to complete the film. And then there's sort of a below the line component, which has to, that does form part of the overall, because that's what you need to cover as a producer. But you can see a very specific line items that cover your travel. They cover a really good sales promo. We do not spend enough money on good sales promos. That's very important. And then the money for the festival strategy. What Rachel spoke about right in her first question is absolutely critical, especially for documentary. There are multiple festivals out there. Everybody focuses on the big ones: South by Southwest, Sundance, Toronto, like there's nothing else. But there really are many, and they will specialize in specific genres. And if you really do your research, or you will be able to see who goes to which festivals, which broadcasters go there, which distributors go there, and what do they actually represent. so that when you are sort of putting together your cost of that segment, festival strategy, festival entry, you sometimes have to re-edit your film for each festival. And like Rachel said, all those different variances of how you deliver those films have to form part of your below the line marketing sort of cost and putting your film together. You want to cover it in the end, but it is a sort of an investment that you'll be making upfront and only recouping much later.
And when it comes to platforms, how, and I'm not sure if this is going to be a fair question to my panelists, but how much of an appetite is there for African content globally, you know, where people can say, this is what I have and this is what I want to distribute? You know, are people at big festivals like MIPCOM or Cannes or, you know, even Durban Film Market that we have in South Africa, is there an appetite, especially Rachel, you're in Canada right now, and, you know, you kind of see where people's appetite is at, you know, is there an appetite for our content?
I think there absolutely is. But I do think people need to understand, and people even in North America need to understand. I think when filmmakers make films, and I've been a filmmaker, so I've been there and I understand, you kind of just think your film is for everybody, and it's not. I mean, you really, and it's okay that it's not, you know, it's okay that if your audience is small, it's okay if your audience is single mothers, it's okay if your audience is, you know, biracial families. Like, it doesn't matter that your audience isn't everyone. But I think a lot of filmmakers think their audience is everyone, and then they get upset when they're not as picked up. But honestly, I think there is absolutely appetite for content from everywhere. I think if there wasn't, there wouldn't be, you know, people traveling to go to festivals all over the world, because, you know, nobody wants reality television forever. At least I don't. Maybe that's just me, who doesn't want reality television forever. But people really like hearing really deep personal content and stories from other places, and they find they connect to it. So I don't necessarily think geography matters as much anymore, but access can be a real issue. You know, a lot of these conferences and events and festivals, they do cost a lot of money, which is why I think actually virtual has been a boon for so many people to be able to connect and share content all over the place, you know. So yes, I think there is, but I do think it can be hard to reach the audiences that are not directly next to you.
And Nicola, do you find that there's an international appetite for a property like Devilsdorp?
Yes, yeah, it is sold very well. But I think I think the world is incredibly ready for African stories. But I do want to say that what's very important when you package your African story for a global market, to understand how important authenticity is, but you still have to do your due diligence. Everything we learned at film school, have you built good characters? Do you care about them? Is there a strong structure? Is there pace? Have you left it at a cliffhanger? Those things are very important. If it's an African story packaged correctly and professionally, I'm telling you, the world is your oyster.
And you know, when we're talking about going to a global audience, I think that's where sometimes we get a shock or a baptism of fire when we realize that internationally people consume content differently from us, you know, in terms of interest, you know, that they may be interested. I mean, we had the octopus teacher do very well and go on to win, you know, massive awards, and it was literally about a man and an octopus underwater in its, you know, in its simplistic form, but there was such an appetite for it. And I think that you know, films like Devilsdorp, you know, being picked up internationally shows us that, you know, we do have to set the bar high. We do have to make our films not just for our friends and family, but for a global audience, because, you know, the world is ready. And what I like is that questions are starting to come in fast and thick. So I think this would be a good time actually to go and just zoom into some of the questions that have come in. I'm going to Tutugani, we've got your comment. Tutugani, one of our attendees, saying very insightful panel discussion. They're learning a lot. Thank you, Tutugani. And just to come to a question from Mickey Redier Lichen Hayes. I'm so sorry to butcher your surname, Mickey. A question for Nicola. Nicola, this is a question for you. If we can look at practical examples of working with Showmax, was Devilsdorp a straight commission? And if so, at what stage did SM Showmax get in or on board? I.e., how far in the process were the producers when they came to you? Did Showmax fund it in full, or did they have other funders as well, the producers? And then was Showmax then the distributor for that? And before you answer, I'm going to take a few questions and then I'm going to come back to my panelists. Nicola, a second question for you. What percentage should one allocate to creating a good sales promo? And another question coming via our Q&A board, if I can just access that. Where is it? There we go. Sheoma wants to know, where does the distribution trends for fiction and non-fiction diverge, or is it generally the same pattern and process? And Rachel, I'm going to give that one to you. And I have a question from Tutugani wanting to know, number one, are there any people or organizations you've worked with to date to create documentaries that can be accessed via virtual reality headsets, augmented reality tools? Okay, that's interesting. And two, do you think making a documentary available on innovative tools would increase its relevance? In other words, a documentary that's a 360-degree film. So if I'm getting Tutugani correctly, they want to know technologically creative films. You know, like we used to have those cinema screens back in the day where you'd watch a film and it's in 3D and, you know, there's all these bells and whistles and it's keeping in line with all the latest technological advancements. How important is it for funders and distributors to see that your film is with the latest trends or is on trend, so to speak? And I'm not sure if that is a Rachel question or a Nicola question, but I see both of you nodding. So I'm going to give both of you a swig at that one. Nicola, I'll start with you because you have the bigger bunch of the questions.
Okay, great. In terms of Devilsdorp, Devilsdorp was an anomaly. It was generated internally. It was because I had been following the story very heavily. And remember, I work for the Mnet Content Hub, and we make all of the content that goes to, regardless of the channel, it goes to Mzansi or Showmax or whatever. So I'd read the story and followed the story, and I then went to go motivate for the money, and I said, we need to do a documentary for this. And we had then put out a tender to a few production companies to come with a creative approach. So we then just chose the creative approach based on the idea, and it was a full commission. And then as a full commission, we distributed fully and own the rights and get the profits for it. But because of the success of Devilsdorp, we are now just commissioning it outright. So where we are getting a lot of presentations in from people with great ideas. But like I said before, just let us know what you have access to and what you don't have access to, because if we go into a documentary, because we're excited because you're going to be speaking to whomever's in prison and it doesn't happen, it reflects very badly, and then people get quite angry about it. Then in terms of the percentage of your sales promo, that's a difficult question, but because it depends on the size of your budget, right? But what I would say is that people don't allow physical time. They'll say, you know, this 90-minute is going to take me 13 weeks to edit, but it will take you another 2 weeks to put together your marketing deliverables, and that is not calculated for. So just remember that you must physically allocate time for that sales promo. The Devilsdorp promo you saw took 36 offlines. 36 offlines. I thought the editor was going to smack me, but it's so necessary to have that done. So allow more time and edit for all of your marketing deliverables. And it might even be worth it, and we did do it with Devilsdorp in the end. We went to another editor to look at it with fresh eyes, somebody who didn't know the story, who didn't have the context. Because if you're taking a sales promo out, remember those distributors and those international parties have zero context of the country. What they know about South Africa and Africa is limited. You have to create not only something that is visually appealing, tells the story, it has to leave them hanging a little bit. They have to wonder what's going on. They need to know exactly what's happening because they have no context. So it's more just making sure that you've allocated time with your editors for sales elements.
Rachel, there was a very interesting question about technological advancement and innovation, and it went straight back to your very, very initial comment of how half the things that you'd written about were already, out of date because technology is moving at such a fast pace.
It's true, but I think the thing to be clear about in a way, especially if you're dealing with documentaries, is I think it has to be related to your subject. If it's not related to your subject, it's just extra expensive stuff that you have to worry about. But if it's directly related to your subject, then it could be useful for people trying to distribute. Like if it was about green energy, or if it was about, like water, like water purification, like if it dealt with a subject where the innovation made sense and helped facilitate things, then it absolutely makes sense. If not, it's just something that's cool and extra and not necessarily relevant. I would also say most people would care. I think most distributors and most organizations care more about production quality than they do about innovative tools. And one of the struggles that distributors have had, from what they told me, was that when they've dealt with content from all around the world, you're dealing with all different formats, you're dealing with lots of different types of ways that content has been originally shot, and then you have to convert it, right? And converting costs time and money too. So I think it's better to focus, personally, I think it's better to focus on production quality and making sure everything is okay before you focus on expensive innovation stuff. But Nicole is at a broadcaster, so I could be wrong about that.
No, I do just want to say, on terms of that, the problem with that is, and I believe that we are moving towards that, albeit quite slowly. So the problem is that there are not enough people who will enjoy that format, not enough people with virtual reality gear. So you've got quite a high and expensive barrier to entry. So at this stage, it's just not enough viewers to make up the numbers for it to be viable yet. But I think the more we start to live in the metaverse, the more that will probably become a reality.
Absolutely. I have a question coming from Bart Smithers, and Bart wants to know, are there any particular trends in documentary topics you are seeing emerging currently? I also mailed a question about a once-off versus a series. It seems festivals are primarily focused around once-off films. Do you recommend always starting with a once-off, a feature-length film? And I'll start with you, Rachel, and then maybe we can go to Nicola about, documentary trends that we are seeing emerging, and also, should somebody start with a once-off or with a series?
So that is going to depend on if you are. So there's a struggle, I think, in the documentary world. It is making a story versus making sure it gets seen. And I say that because a lot of the filmmakers I talked to for the book would say series is easier to sell to television than one-offs. So if you're trying to go to television, series is easier, and then you've got to go to the television station and understand what their 1 hour is considered, because it's different for everybody. If you're trying for BBC versus Canal Plus versus, Mnet, everybody has a different hour, right? So you kind of have to do that. So the one-offs is what festivals do mostly. They don't program television series. So that is true. If you're going to markets, they want a lot of, so it kind of depends on who you want your audience to be and who you're trying to reach before you could sort of answer that question. A lot of times filmmakers need to do one-offs in order to create some sort of example that they can finish something, because obviously it's going to be really hard to finish a whole series, right? And then try to sell it to someone. So in a way, you usually do have to do a one-off to show that you know how to produce something and that you can finish it and that you can deliver. But at the same time, series, if you're trying to get on television, series are easier for that. So I think it kind of depends on which audience you are trying to reach with your story, if that makes any sense.
Absolutely. Nicola?
Yeah, I agree with Rachel. It's one of the hardest choices to make. So proud of Devilsdorp, and then we couldn't enter it into any bloody festival. It was too long. And we had to...
Could you have recut it into a 90-minute feature, for instance?
One of the festivals asked us to cut 4 hours into 3, and I was like, I just don't know where you go with that, because I don't know actually what to do. That was sort of the longest we could do. So it broke my brain, and we didn't. So it didn't work. So then your approach becomes different. Then you end up actually approaching broadcasters. You know, you call A&W in the UK that do like crime and investigation channel, and then you start going to them. But the festivals definitely prefer a 90-minute. And then your rollout becomes slightly different. You know, if you do get a very strong 90-minute, people like Paramount will give you a cinema release, you know, and that's completely different to a broadcasting series again. So I don't know. I feel like if you're stuck and you don't really know, what does the story tell you? We get so many proposals and they're like, there's this one crime and we're going to do it for 10 hours. And I cannot think of anything worse. Ask yourself honestly, does it really sustain for 4 hours, 3 hours? Is it only a 90-minute? I think let that guide you.
Wonderful. And Bart, I hope that you've been answered. I think our panelists have answered quite well there. I have a question, and perhaps it's going to be one of our last questions because we're 4 minutes from closing this the session. It's from Palisa Libona, and it's for Rachel. The question is, you had mentioned having technical aspects in order before engaging with distributors. As much as these may vary across distributors, is there a general checklist and or specifications that docs should follow?
Yes, I wrote it in my book, but I don't necessarily want you to have to pay for it if you don't have any money. So basically there's so you need errors and omissions, at least in the United States. This may be true in Africa, in South Africa too, I don't know. You need something called errors and omissions. Errors and omissions is a type of insurance. You need this in Canada too. You do need it, I think, in some of Europe at least. You have to sort of check which country you're trying to send it to also. But and this is true no matter what kind of distribution. Distributors like errors and omissions insurance because basically it is you proclaiming through a lawyer that you have cleared everything that in order to send it out into the world. So it is thousands of dollars usually. It is a nice chunk of change, but it means that if anybody is distributing your film and they get sued, that everybody's covered. That's basically what it is. Like it basically makes sure that no one gets sued for what you've made. So errors and omissions, super important. Cue sheets are really, really important. Nicola's smiling. Cue sheets are incredibly important. This is true for a distributor. It's true for TV. It's true for everyone because people need to know like what is in there. Partially because cue sheets, even beyond sort of television and broadcasting, get used for something called, like, I don't know if disability accessibility requirements are required in South Africa, but in North America, they are. Like closed captioning and audio description are very important to be able to use content with a variety of audiences. So distributors really love that stuff. If you don't have it, they will make you pay for it and put it as part of their like expenses in their distribution agreement because it does cost money and labor to do. So you need those things. So errors and omissions. You need release forms. And you need release forms from everybody. If there's artwork in your film, you need a release form for it. If there is someone talking in your film, you need a release for it. If there's music in your film, you need a release for it. Talk to a lawyer if you have to, or one of the things I suggest, because lawyers can be expensive, is you talk to your local documentary organizations like DFA, because someone there knows something. I mean, I think a lot of things filmmakers do is they do things at their home in the computer, and they should really talk to their local people more and find out what their experiences were so that they don't repeat mistakes that people have already like figured out. I hope that answers some of your question.
Absolutely. And I think Nicola has been nodding away, furiously agreeing with some of your points. Let me just give you literally about a minute as well, Nicola.
Yeah. I just want to say it's the same thing again. You spend money on lawyers. The minute that you are talking about the police, murders, however, and there's a big focus on true crime, any of that sort of thing, errors and omission, insurance and lawyers, pay for them. They're worth it.
they're worth it. And I think that's a great note to thank both of you for joining us on this particular webinar. And yes, it will be recording. It has been recorded.